want to share a couple of quick tips about shooting with the Sony A7 Mark II. Now truthfully, many of these tips will apply across Sony's cameras, and some of them even across many cameras. First tip I want to share with you, and this is the one that applies across many cameras, any camera that allows you to assign back button focus, I think you should turn it on. Why? Well, very commonly you step up to a scene and you get your focus and you take a picture. And then you probably need to adjust your exposure settings and take another picture. You don't need the camera to refocus in between those. It's just kind of a waste of time and energy, and especially when we're talking about cameras that don't have the best battery life. Any little bit of energy you can save is good. Now, if you're recomposing or you're changing your aperture, then yes, you should refocus. But otherwise, you don't need to refocus in between shots. And in trickier situations, maybe you have carefully gotten focus through a bunch of trees to nicely compose or frame your subject. And cameras that could easily get confused and try to refocus on the wrong thing are just a complete waste of time. Putting the focus in your hands and separating it from the shutter button is a good thing because it allows you to avoid situations like that. To set up back button focus on the Sony A7 Mark II, it's actually two steps. First, you have to unassign focusing from the shutter button and assign the AF/MF button to focus. So I'm going to press menu, and that's going to bring me into my camera menu. I need to get over to the gear icon and go all the way over to page 4 first. AF with shutter. I'm going to turn that off. So what that means now is when I press the shutter, it only meters. When I press the shutter halfway, it only meters. It does not focus. This does take some getting used to, but it is the better way to do things, I believe. That's why I'm showing you. Now I'm gone back into the menu and I've gone to page 6, and I need to go to the custom key settings. This is where you can assign all of the different custom buttons to do some function. I'm going to go to page 2 and I'm going to go down to the AF/MF button. That is this button when the switch is up to AF/MF. And I'm going to scroll down on that option and say AF on. Now when I press the back button, it will autofocus for me. And when I press the shutter button, it will not autofocus, but it will take a picture. Now the Sony cameras have a lot of selectable points. It's really nice. It allows you to say exactly where you want focus to happen. But choosing those points can be a little daunting. There is no dedicated button for it on the back of this camera. However, they do allow you to assign a lot of these different buttons to whatever you want. And I recommend you assign the center button of the control pad to your focus point selector. To assign the center button to pick your focus point, we need to go back into the menu. Now we're still on this custom key settings, and that's actually where we need to go again. I'm going to go into the custom key settings and go down to the custom or center button. It's currently set to IAF. There are lots of options in here, lots and lots. I just scrolled through them really fast. I want to go to focus settings. So if I use focus settings for the center point, now when I press it, it will allow me to choose the area of the screen or the area in my picture composition that I want to use for focus. And right now I have this kind of center focus or zone mode focus. So if we go back here to function and I come over to focus area and I go down and set flexible spot M, now I can move that single spot around and then focus using my back button focus. So one more time, let's press center button, and now just using the directional pad on this wheel, I can move that point around very quickly. There's no intermediate steps. This I found to be the best button to set. You could assign one of the C1 or C2 that's up here on the dial, or even C3, but I found that naturally my hand is right here, and then using this to quickly move the point works very nicely. In general, the focusing system of this camera is quite good, but I've noticed that it does start to suffer. You'll notice some slowdowns and some confusion in lower light. you can do yourself a favor by sticking to the center and actually moving away from the single focus point and allowing to move into one of the zone modes. That will give you better results in lower light, more consistent results. Now, I do recommend most of the time using this flexible spot for your area, but if you're in lower light, using the center or the zone and sticking to the center will give you better results because of the way Sony's focusing system is set up. Battery life in these cameras is not fantastic, and here's a couple of tips to make your battery power go just a little bit further. The first one is to turn off pre-AF. Now, pre-AF is a kind of helpful system that is in Sony cameras that is auto-focusing before you even have pressed the shutter button. Now, I found that to be more frustrating, battery issues aside, than anything, because there were times where I'd focused on a scene, taken my picture, and then let the camera drift into a different direction as I was thinking about the scene, and when I brought it back up to the eye, it was wildly out of focus because of that pre-AF. Having that on kind of ruins the whole point of having back button autofocus on. So I recommend you turn that off for two reasons. One, it saves energy because the camera won't be trying to focus when you don't ask it to. And two, it will only focus when you want it to. To turn off the pre-AF, we go to Menu, and we go up and over page 3 of your custom settings, pre-AF off. Now, one of the things that I love about this camera is the easy ability to share photos. Just lay your NFC-enabled phone or press the button and the photo or photos is flinging their way across to your smartphone or tablet. However, that does eat up battery life, not just the fact of doing that, but the fact that the camera is always ready and searching for these Wi-Fi points that it needs to connect to, or that your phone is connected to and broadcasting. You can turn this off by going into airplane mode. Turn airplane mode on, we go into the menu and we go to our little Wi-Fi page, and at the bottom of the Wi-Fi page, we can turn that on. Now, that does take away some of the fun, so when you're going out for a long hike and you know you won't need to share photos while you're hiking, that's great when you should turn it off. Otherwise, I would leave it on and make that battery sacrifice. Now, I recommend everybody have at least one spare battery for their camera, and that is really important with the Sonys. But because they allow USB charging, you have another option as well, and that is these little battery backup bits that you can buy off Amazon or B&H for quite cheap, and they are packed with power and will easily charge your camera. So you can throw one of these in your camera bag and go out for the day, and when you're not using your camera, say sit down for lunch or you're driving in the car for a while, you can just plug it in and it will nicely be charging. Now, we started this series with a general tip that I said really applies to any camera, back button focusing. I've got another tip to you that really applies to any camera, and that is buy yourself a nice little prime lens. There are lots of reasons why. I've got a video that has 5 reasons. I actually got a blog post where I added a 6th reason. And on the Sony side of things, you have this 35mm f2.8 lens, which is just tiny, light, and fantastic. And when paired with something like the Sony A7 Mark II, it is stabilized. This allows you to really go anywhere in very low light situations without a tripod and get amazing shots that are very clean because you can keep your ISO down, because you can lower your shutter speed, and using a prime lens like that, you can really open up the aperture. So do yourself a favor. If you've bought a nice camera like this, please buy yourself a decent prime lens, and that Sony 35mm f2.8 is a great example of one. These were just a couple of quick tips that I think will make your experience with the Sony cameras and Sony A7 Mark II in particular just a little bit nicer. If you've got any questions or you got tips of your own, I'd love to hear them. Just leave them right down below. And if you haven't already subscribed, take a moment and do that, along with hitting that thumbs up button. If you'd really like in-depth discussions and support about what gear is next best for you, take a moment and look at my support page where I offer a variety of ways you can get the answers you're looking for, not just me, but other smart people that are happy to help you answer your gear and camera and photography questions. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.